This podcast is part of the Game and Entertainment Network. Visit tgenetwork.net to find the latest episodes from all our shows.
It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Aggronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belgast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again. Time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 204. Tonight I'm joined by Grace.
Hello.
Tam.
Hello.
And Thalen.
Hello.
Do you know how hard it is to not say Ashgar?
It's super weird for me to go first, I have to say.
Yeah. It's you get used to the rhythm of the names, and when that's not the case, it really throws me for a loop. So Ash and Kodra are doing something and cannot be here this week, so it is time to push forward and attempt to make a show out of one of our weeks where we don't have a lot of things. So kind of as a starter, I have been playing State of Decay 2, which kind of came out Friday. They're doing one of those things where if you pre-ordered the game, you get early access, which to some extent is kind of cool, especially since it's not a MMO. But that's a practice like I've only really experienced in MMO titles or some kind of an online level grind, skill grind type game where you're given a head start to try and push ahead of the pack. And because this is like a largely single player game, I really wasn't super focused on like trying to play at midnight or anything like that. I kind of casually logged in last night, then I've been playing quite a bit today. This is a frustrating title for me, in part because I really love the original State of Decay, and I really enjoyed the little tweaks that they made for the Year One Survival Edition. And like I have either bought that game or talked people into buying it so many times, and it always felt like it was kind of an incomplete game.
Yeah.
There were certain things that were just janky that never ever got any better, and it also felt like this would be a really great world to run around with a friend as a co-op experience. And more than anything else, State of Decay 2 gives you that ability to play co-op. The only problem is the co-op experience is a little weird in that, like, the game centers around building communities. So you go out into the zombie-filled wasteland and find survivors and bind them together into a community, and you go off on resource runs trying to make some place that's defensible and some place where you can keep everyone's morale up, where you can heal up after you've been running around. So that's cool. Like, you're really bought into the experience of I'm going off and collecting these people and making a team out of them. And it also makes it really difficult in that the fact that like there is permadeath in this game. Like, right. When you lose a character, you never see that character again. It's just gone. And there's no take-backs. There's no reloading your save. It's just gone. Like, you got to go find another resource or if your base completely gets overrun and everyone dies, then it starts you over as somebody else in some other part of the world. So you do get invested in the community. And while I have not actually played multiplayer, I've talked to some folks who have, and the biggest problem with multiplayer is the fact that it's not a situation where you're both existing in the same world. Whereas, like, I have my community, and Thalen has his community, and we're going to share resources, or we're going to trade between each other, kind of like you would do in a 4X game. Mm-hmm. Instead, you've got one person that is the primary for the game, and then everyone else that joins is just kind of playing in their world. And
visiting.
Are really... Right, and they're very limited in what they can actually do and interact with the world. And in part, that's to protect you from, like, letting someone into your game and then they go into your base and rob you blind. But the weird part about that is, like, say I bring a character that I love playing over into your game, and then things go south and I die. That character is now dead in my game, too.
Oh.
So, yeah, it's weird. It's like, it feels weird that in some ways it's not really real, but in other ways it is absolutely really real. But I've largely been playing the single-player campaign, which involves, the standard stuff from the first game. It's like things are more fleshed out. There's a new mechanic called the Blood Plague, which is actually... So one of the weird things about the first game is that you couldn't actually turn into a zombie.
Right.
Like, it was super rare. Like, you could die, but it wouldn't necessarily turn you into a zombie. Whereas now there are special kinds of zombies. Like, if you remember from the first game, they had, like, the really bad zombies were the ones with the red eyes. In this game, they've made it so that those red-eyed zombies are the Blood Plague zombies. And you can also visually tell from a long distance that they're, like, seeping blood out of their pores. So they're, like, super infectious. And every time you take a hit from a Blood Plague zombie, a meter increases on your character. And if you do nothing to fix it, eventually when that meter gets full, that character will die and will be out in the world as basically a mega zombie. That if you encounter it with another character, it's going to be far more difficult, far faster, etc. So kind of like the Nemesis system that what the Mordor Shadows of Mordor game has. Yeah. So that's kind of cool that, when your character dies, it's still a powerful critter, but now it's just a zombie critter. However, that doesn't really seem to be that big of a deal, like, to deal with. The Blood Plague zombies aren't any harder hitting or faster. They're just more dangerous because, if you get hit by them, it ticks your meter up. But you start off with a doctor that knows, like, you start off in like a military camp that you and your companion, and you get to choose, like, from a bunch of different setups. Like, it could be brothers, it could be friends, it could be lovers or husband and wife, or there's a bunch of different options for the type of characters that you start off with. I think there's like 12 different combos that you can start off with. And much like the first game, in the progress of the first things, like, the other character, whichever one you're not actively playing, ends up getting infected with the Blood Plague. And as you're evacuating this tutorial area, you end up with this doctor that has figured out a cure for the Blood Plague. But you have to collect parts from Blood Plague zombies to craft it. But just in roaming around the world, I seem to never not have enough of these things to cleanse my Blood Plague if it ever gets too high. That means I can't really get too far from base, and I was on a long jaunt earlier, and it was kind of like maybe pushing it up against the line that I might not make it back if I encountered too many more blood zombies before I got back to base. But I did make it, and I got healed, and all of that was fine. What seems to be the bigger problem is just keeping your base in resources. And I'm not sure if... It seems like to me that there is a finite amount of resources out in the world, and as you explore areas, you are using up those resources. So I don't know, like, it feels kind of desperate in that I don't know if there's ever a point at which I can reach just equilibrium where I'm getting enough to keep my community happy and healthy and alive, but also being able to go out and do things other than just constantly hunting for resources. But then again, I guess that fits the theme of trying to survive in a zombie-infested world.
Yeah, it makes sense that
sooner or later, your current base, you just wouldn't have the stuff nearby to survive, and you'd have to move on and find a new location.
Probably the best tweak that they made is one of the things that I hated from the first game, is that if you explore an area and you decide not to pick up an item, that item was effectively just lost to you forever.
Yeah, that really annoyed me too.
Now you can just straight up drop things on the ground and they remain there forever.
Huh.
So like if you're out exploring, and so you can only keep one pack. So I don't know at what point they added this into the first game, but like if you were out exploring, you could go get a large bundle of resources and take it back to camp, but you could only carry one of those at a time. And
Right.
those quickly become like the best way to go get resources. So if you're out exploring and you find one of those early on and pick it up, and then you find one later that you decide better fits what your base needs, you can just drop the pack on the ground and pick the new one up and move on, and then at a later date go back to wherever you dropped the pack and go get it. The other cool thing is, well, so this is a cool thing and a negative thing. Cars are not infinite resources.
Right.
You have to gas them up now, and you have to like find gas, and you have to repair them. And there's really not a lot of them out in the world yet that I've found.
That was something in the first one that seemed kind of weird to me, was that there were cars everywhere, and they all had infinite gas.
Yeah, well, and like I would just leave them. Like I would drive them until they were almost dead and about to explode, and then I'd pop out, and then I'd go get one from the next driveway and continue on. Now the trade-off there is cars now are a storage system. So those packs that you can only carry one of, you know, if you're in like a panel van, for example, you may be able to store 8 of those packs in the van and take them all back to base at once. So that's really nice. Like once you get transportation, you can actually more effectively farm resources.
Yeah, that's cool.
The only negative is like cars seem to go through gas really fast, like an unrealistically fast amount. Also, the cars are way harder to handle than they were in the first game. So you are far more likely to bang into things, which ultimately damages the car, which ultimately requires you to repair the vehicle. So like there's a bunch of little things that are putting you in a situation where you're constantly looking for stuff to basically pay the upkeep of keeping your community in items and also keeping you in enough items to keep going off and exploring. I wound up finally installing the Windows version because originally I was going to play the Xbox One client. And this is a situation where the base Xbox One client is not that good. And it really disappoints me that it is not a great experience. Like, you can kind of tell that this is a game that was tuned for the Xbox One X to really showcase the things that it could do. Because I've seen footage of it playing in 4K on an Xbox One X, and it looks great. And it looks like absolute garbage on an Xbox One. Like, the signs are illegible, that the textures are so blurry, and I don't know if that's just an optimization problem or, you know, day one jitters. Like, I had all sorts of issues on the Xbox.
That's so frustrating. Like,
That is
they shouldn't
frustrating.
be that different.
Now, the benefit, though, is, like, this is a cross-buy game, so if you bought it on Xbox, you also get a copy on the Windows Store, which is its own rant that I'm going to get into in a few minutes.
Oh, man.
But it downloaded my save, and I was able to pick up exactly where I left off on the Xbox, so it's
That's
not
good.
that bad, and it really does look pretty at 4K. And I'm able to run it at a nice stable frame rate at 4K on my GTX 980, which isn't really a great 4K gaming card. But part of the disappointment that I have in this game is the fact that Microsoft decided this was going to be one of their big internal developed titles that was going to be exclusive to Microsoft platforms. And much like all of those have been, they end up offered exclusively through the Windows Store, which is just a garbage interface. It is not good. Also, the fact that it's running as an app, not as a traditional piece of software, has some weirdness. Like the alt tab experience feels weird because of the way that it's working, and it doesn't have like it's just weird. Like running as an app is just weird. And I don't know, like I was really torn. Like I considered not getting the game until it eventually ended up on Steam, because it's probably eventually going to end up in Steam.
Seems likely.
Which is in part why I was going to play it on the Xbox One, is I had kind of convinced myself that I was going to be able to skirt the Windows Store by doing that, and that didn't end up happening because that client was not great. Honestly, like, the other big disappointment takeaway is this is kind of like Destiny 2 in that it felt like, I mean, this feels like this could have just been a expansion to the original game. I mean, I realize they switched engines, they did a bunch of functional changes between the two games, but for the most part, it feels like an improved version of the original game. I mean, combat feels better, the exploring mechanic feels better, the base building mechanic feels better, but it's pretty similar to the original game. Like, there's enough that's different that it would take you a few minutes to adjust, but it's not really a completely different game. Much like Destiny 2 wasn't a completely different game than Destiny 1. So I have a feeling that, like, there's going to be a lot of people that were expecting more than what they got. I am largely happy with it, but I was also largely happy with the original game, even though it was kind of janky. The Windows client seems way more polished than the console client, because I encountered a ton of weird bugs, like the UI would just start flashing for no reason, like strobe effect flashing, and then I would move somewhere else and it would be fine. There would be issues where the terrain would do the thing where one of the polygons goes up to the sky and causes a weird glitch, but I've not seen any of that on the Windows client. So I don't know. I don't know if the console version just wasn't well optimized, or if Unreal Engine 4 is having issues running on consoles, which you would think that it wouldn't, because surely someone else has been releasing games in that on consoles. So I guess the takeaway is I'm enjoying it, but I would probably also wait for a while, because I'm sure there will be patches that, especially on the console, fix some of the weird glitches that are going on.
Yeah.
I would like to try the multiplayer, though, at some point, just so I can experience it for myself, even though it's kind of weird. So last week we talked about Destiny 2 Warmind expansion, and at that point Grace had not made it through the campaign. And now that you have, do you have any impressions?
Yeah, I mean, I think my impressions are pretty similar to what we talked about last week. But really, the first impression was, man, you were not kidding about how short it is. I mean, I played through the first quest before we talked last week, and I hit a gear wall because I pretty much didn't play at all during the SARS. And, that was frustrating. I almost kind of wished that they had put that wall up front, if they were going to do it at all.
Yeah.
So that I could have looked at it and gone, oh, I better just go prepare myself, and then I can start this stuff. And instead, it was like, oh, okay, I got into it, like, I watched the cutscene, I did the first quest, and, was excited about new stuff, and then ran into a quest where I just could not do it. I got my butt handed to me about 8 or 10 times before I gave up and was like, alright, I'm gonna go farm some gear. And, that's just not fun. And because story-wise, questing-wise, they made a good decision to, not care whether people went through Osiris. It was frustrating that they still expected you to have been at least playing enough during that time to be geared out.
Yeah.
So, either if they had just changed, the tuning so that it wasn't required, or if they had, made a way to hand out a set of gear so that you could just jump right in. Anything like that would have been greatly appreciated. But the story itself, was cool. It really felt like there was a missing quest or a missing cutscene or something. They you go through sort of the first quest or two, and there's like this nice cutscene at the end, and then you go to pick up the next quest from Anna Bray, and just in the sort of quick quest intro bit, she's like, "Oh, by the way, there's this big bad thing, and now we have to deal with it." And if I hadn't had you, Bel, to explain the lore of Destiny to me, I certainly wouldn't have known what that was already, and I wouldn't have really known or cared that much what it was even after playing those first couple quests. So, like, it felt like something was somewhat missing there. Like, it felt very rushed. And again, at the end, where, during these couple of quests, Zavala's like, "No, we're not going to use Rasputin. No, we're not going to use Rasputin. Don't do this thing." And then suddenly, okay, fine, whatever.
Well,
the last quest.
I talked about this like over the week when we were talking about like your experiences, but the fact that they use Zavala to do this just felt weird. Like, to me, it would have made a lot more logical sense to like put Saladin, which is also a big Titan dude, in that place, because like Saladin has real reasons to fear the machinations of Clovis Bray and Rasputin and the Siva that came from it. So like it would totally make sense that Saladin would be freaked about, doing anything with Rasputin. Whereas Zavala, like, we've already encountered Rasputin lots in, the original game. Like, some of it was stuff that Zavala sent you out on missions to.
Yeah, it just felt very weird that he was so resisted, and then also that he so quickly turned around. But it was
just
fun.
Feels like we're missing a chapter or something.
Yeah, like it felt like it was rushed or something was missing from it. It definitely was short enough that contributed to the feeling of it being rushed. But then, since finishing up, I haven't done much else in the so-called end game. I basically finished the story and then immediately restarted it. Finished it on my Warlock and immediately restarted on my Hunter, and haven't done much else. But it just, some of the weapon tuning and things that have changed does feel better. Where I do feel, unlike at the start of Destiny 2, I do feel like I'm at least pretty functional with whatever weapon I pick up, even if it's not my favorite. Which wasn't always the case at the beginning when it launched. So that feels better, but it just, there's nothing about it that feels novel or changed enough that I'm like super excited about continuing to play. Like, I'm glad I had it. I got to see the story and play through it. And I'll probably poke around a little bit more, do some of the post 30 questing and, some other things, but it doesn't, at least right now, it doesn't feel like enough to really draw me back into the game in the way that I was when the game launched.
That's a pity.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad because I really didn't care for Curse of Osiris, and I was hoping that when this came out, that there'd be enough little changes and new things to do that it would draw me back in, because I like the game. I had tons of fun at launch when we were trying out the raids and doing things together. But, playing solo, I guess that's the other piece of it too, is, our clan is pretty much dead. And so all of those nice perks that you get from your clan, we're not getting because nobody's playing.
Well, and unfortunately, like, they've nerfed those perks significantly. So, like, once upon a time, if you were in a clan and the clan completed the raid, everyone in the clan got raid gear. Like, just, that was a thing. Like each week that the clan completed the raid, everyone would get an Ingram that had raid gear. If you had anyone in the clan that beat the trials, everyone in the clan would get a trials item. And they've nerfed those to where the raid item basically gives you an engram that will give you a piece of Vanguard gear. So, like, anything from the Vanguard stack that's got, like, Nameless Midnight or Origin Story, basically the weapons you can get from Zavala. And the other one gives you a Crucible item, which is the loot table for Lord Shaxx. So that greatly dilutes how cool that whole clan thing feels.
Yeah, that's frustrating because that was such a cool system.
That was a really good system.
So they listened to the high-end raiders
Yes,
and high-end PvPers that were bitching that other people got that loot. Lovely.
Yes, yeah. They listened to the hardest of hardcores.
That's really dumb.
And they've also are putting back in random item rolls, which is something that the hardest of hardcores wanted. So, I don't know. Like, I don't know what they're thinking.
Yeah, I mean, that feels like multiple big steps backward.
I mean, if I had to guess, they're thinking, our attach rate is not as good as we had hoped. What can we do? Oh, people are complaining about this, let's do that. And if I had to guess, I'm going to guess it'll have the exact opposite effect that they're hoping for.
It is probably going to have the exact opposite effect.
I mean, it certainly has the opposite effect for me. I take one look at that and go, oh, you took something that was actually kind of nice and took it away.
Well, and the other big problem that I'm encountering is the light grind is so slow right now. The upper bound of the cap that you can hit pretty easily is 345. Like, that's where you can get off of getting regular increments. Anything over that, it's like powerful Ingrams only to get above. And I've had 2 weeks of those now, and I'm not even close to 2 or 350.
Yeah, that's also incredibly frustrating because it's super fast to get to that point, right? Like, I'm already just about there without having done hardly anything other than the story and a little bit of running around doing patrols and things. And that's I don't know, that's another thing that will just chase me away, because if I feel like running around and doing fun things in the world, things that I enjoy in the world, can net me something useful, that I'm going to keep doing it for a while. But if I'm doing the activities that I enjoy and getting almost nothing out of it, then why am I doing anything? There are plenty of other games.
Well, the biggest problem in like what Thalen said with attach rate is this design change that they've made is absolutely responsible for it. Because the biggest problem that you run into is if there are 6 things you can do in a given week that will move the needle forward, and 3 of those are serious group activities. That means most people that are soloists have 3 opportunities every week to do anything that's going to feel like meaningful change in their character, and those can be done in roughly an hour.
And so, also, if you're me and you don't like PvP, then you only have 2 opportunities.
Right. So yeah, like, I mean, back when I was running all 3 characters, I could do all 3 of those, weekly milestones in about an hour per character. And then I was done. Like, I was out of things that felt meaningful for me to do that week. And that doesn't feel great. Like, if just the act of playing the game occasionally had the chance of moving the needle forward, it would feel better to just go off and do stuff. Like, if running heroics had a chance of giving you gear occasionally that would, move your light levels up, or doing the casual on-world stuff that they used to have, like Court of Oryx or Archon's Forge, there was always a chance that you might get something that was better light than you currently had. And most of those capped out at some point to where you could only move it up with a handful of activities, but the difference between where that cap was and where the actual hard cap was way smaller than there is now. Because, like, right now, the soft cap begins at 345. The hard cap is 385. Whereas...
Yeah, that seems like... You just saying those words has just convinced me that I don't feel like playing Destiny 2 anymore.
Well, like, so back during Taken King, for example, as a comparison, the soft cap for light was 330. The hard cap was 335. There was a 5 light difference between those two. So sure, yeah, like, you can deal with, like, slow movement on those last 4 or 5 points because it felt like you were so close. Like, yeah, that was fine for the last little bit to take a while because you're functionally able to do all the stuff that you could do at 330. It was just more of a bragging right to say you got to 335. And I don't know, like, that design, that core piece of their design is what made it feel bad. And, like, the other thing that just never made sense was the fact that, like, you can only infuse like objects. Back in Destiny 1, it felt so much better when you could just, like, take any slot, like, infuse a power weapon into another power weapon, or a secondary into another secondary, or you could give your alts hand-me-down. So, sure, you wanted to run your alt up to the same light level as your main, you could get a pair of pants that dropped that you're not going to use and hand it over to your alt and use it as infusion fodder. But all that went away, and it just kind of feels lousy.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it feels like a game that is catering to a player who is super not me. And maybe that's fine if they have lots of players who are super not me who are continuing to play the game. But
I don't know that they do.
Yeah, I'm not sure that they do.
And honestly, what makes it worse is the fact that they've been saying they're putting in, like, text chat for PC clans for, like, the last quarter and a half, and it's still not in. It still keeps getting moved back further and further in the release schedule, and that was, like, the core problem of why clans didn't work, because there was really no way to communicate with each other. And it goes back to, like, a rant that I had from this week is, in MMO design, the important text goes to the left.
Yeah.
And
they have this, there's this really, and Destiny 1 had the same thing, where they really don't want to admit they're an MMO. And they're absolutely an MMO, but they really don't want to admit that they're an MMO.
Right,
And
it's
I don't
a
know
problem.
what the deal is with that.
And the thing is like, the stigma of MMOs is gone. Console players play MMOs, like, in huge numbers now.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time Destiny was released, sure, there was a stigma attached to MMOs, but, like, that's gone. People are more than happy to play console MMOs along with their first-person shooters. Like, it's just a different experience. Like, I mean, Elder Scrolls Online is doing really well, in part thanks to the console audience.
Yeah. And I feel like I feel like they've got an issue where they need to be like, look, yeah, you're making an MMO, just, like, live with it. Like, and learn the lessons that MMOs learned so that you can, like, make a better game. Because I don't think it's serving them. I don't think it's serving them to continue to be like put their hands over their ears and be like, no, we're not making an MMO, not an MMO, not an MMO.
I mean, I don't even care if they keep saying that they're not an MMO, if they would actually at least learn the lessons from MMOs and not
Right.
Occasionally some of their decisions almost feel like they're just doing the opposite thing to be contrary, to prove how much they're not an MMO, and that's incredibly not helpful for everyone.
Yeah, it's like part of the time they're denying they're an MMO, and part of the time they're not saying anything about it. They're just intentionally fighting established MMO things just so that they're not doing it, even when they're good ideas.
Well, and that's the problem, is a lot of the core issues with Destiny 2 are just solved problems for MMOs. They're things that they've known how to do for years. Like every MMO post WoW does certain things a certain way, and they do it in part because, like, sure, there's a certain amount of, like, we're copying what's working well, but there's a certain amount of, like, it's working well because it just works well. Like, these are good ideas. This is a good solution to the problem.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's part of what's so frustrating about it, is, like, they live in the corporate superstructure that also has Blizzard. They have used Blizzard to learn in the past. Like, they had the Diablo 3 team over to talk about, the itemization changes that they did right before Taken King to make things feel better for Taken King. So they have this lineage that they could be drawing from.
Well, and I think it is really telling that that they brought the Diablo 3 itemization team in, not the WoW itemization team that is inarguably more experienced across a much broader spectrum.
Though, to be fair, I feel like Diablo 3 does loot way better than WoW.
I was gonna say, I think that they're actually better served by copying Diablo 3 on their loot, both because of the way that loot drops in Destiny, and because I find loot in Diablo way more satisfying than in WoW.
I mean, it's true, but if you've got the resource, why wouldn't you talk to both and figure out which ones work best? Except for Diablo 3 is not an MMO.
Well, I wonder also if there is an aspect of, no, we're Bungie. We don't learn from other people. They learn from us.
There's also that, probably.
I mean, there's got to be a lot of corporate pride there.
There's a certain amount of arrogance in Bungie, just because they made Halo. They know everything about, I mean, they almost by definition know everything about shooters, so why would they need to learn anything from anybody else?
Because they're making a genre that they've never made before, that they keep pretending doesn't exist. They're making an MMO.
It makes me think in a lot of ways of BioWare. Like, BioWare, from isometric RPGs to Mass Effect, and the amount of, we don't know how to make this, we are going to hire people who know how, learn how, top to bottom. How do we make an action game? We don't know. Like, how do we make a over-the-shoulder shooter? And, like, that worked. BioWare learned. And Mass Effect was great. But there was definitely a lot of, I mean, I remember all of the articles that were like, hey, here's how we're learning how to make a shooter. We're learning from all of these people. We're referencing all of these other games. We've had all of these conversations to figure out how to make this work.
Well, and the reality is, Mass Effect 1, it didn't necessarily fully work.
No.
Mass Effect 2 was a massive leap forward in what they were trying to do.
They learned a lot between the two.
It's true. And they made a ton of changes to suit it. Like, they were willing to be like, wow, Mass Effect 1 had a bunch of good ideas, but wasn't perfect and had a bunch of obvious flaws. So let's learn from those and make a better thing next time.
I mean, and in part, I feel like Andromeda was BioWare being a little arrogant, that they had solved the problem how to make these games and now could basically just dial it in with not the A team.
I don't know. I bet there are all kinds of interesting development stories out of Andromeda.
But anyway, so yeah, Destiny 2 is a game that, like, still has a mechanical loop that I enjoy a lot, but its reasons for me to be in that loop are really not that great.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun until you hit that wall, and then...
So, for a brief period of time, it stole time away from Monster Hunter for me, but I can quickly see that, like, it is not giving me a lot of reasons to log in and keep pushing forward. So, another game that we just talked about a few minutes ago that is I have a kind of strained relationship with is World of Warcraft. And I'm in a really weird place with this game because I am not interested in Battle for Azeroth at all. And every time something leaks out, it makes me even less interested in Battle for Azeroth because they are doing some just bullshit with the storylines.
Yeah, I'm glad I don't have any interest in World of Warcraft anymore, because boy, that would kill it real quick if I did.
Battle for Azeroth, or
yes.
I guess I'm out of the loop as far as.
So, okay, so spoiler time.
Put the war back in World of Warcraft.
So spoiler time. Like, listeners, if you want to experience Battle for Azeroth fresh, I would stop listening for a while, and I don't know how to tell you when to start listening again, but one of the storylines that's come out of the alpha beta, whatever they're calling it right now, is the story of the Magyar orcs, however you pronounce that. And when I first saw them as an allied race, I thought, oh, so we're going to go back to Outland and get them as a race. But that's not the version that we're getting. We're getting the ones from the Warlords of Draenor timeline, except for we are not going back into past Draenor to get them. I don't know how that's happening. Like, I didn't read close enough to understand the specifics of how they went to the future of a past timeline.
Yeah, that was confusing by itself, but that was the very, very least of my concerns.
That's just
which is a problem.
That's just like the icing on top of the shit cupcake.
Well,
so in Warlords of Draenor, they introduced a really amazing character named Rel. Or Wyrel, or I
always pronounce it Irel, but I have no idea.
I tend to just say Rel, but with the Y is silent, but Yrel. A basically paladin that Draenei that ultimately rises up to lead her people against the onslaught of the orcs. And like, she's a really cool character. Like, she's a very, I don't know, pure character, for lack of a better term. Makes a great protagonist for the storyline. Helps both the Horde and the Alliance in Warlords of Draenor. Just wants to stop the onslaught of the Iron Horde and what they're doing to the orcs, empowering them.
And she was a cool and interesting character that got introduced in that expansion. She got to do some interesting things. She was totally new to the lore, and she was really kind of neat. And a lot of people really liked her and asked that she either come back with us, continue into Legion, continue her story in some way, because she was so cool. And so, of course, when Legion came around, she was completely forgotten and left behind, because Blizzard does not ever bring something from an expansion forward.
Right.
So
classic Blizzard.
Scan ahead. They have given us more of her storyline. In this future state, she has turned into, like, this brutal dictator that hunts down orcs and persecutes the orcs.
So, I mean, spoilers for Legion, right? Like, one of the things that came out of the end of that expansion is that, hey, sometimes, like, the light is not always a great thing. And, like, these beings that embody the pure light actually sometimes are kind of assholes, forcing people into things that, against their will because it's for the light. And so somehow in the amount of time that we've somehow skipped forward, going back to Draenor, the Draenei have fallen under this type of influence. So they are super, super into the light to the point of fascism.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Just what we need.
Enrel is the leader of this group and kind of a, I don't know, God Emperor type character of the light.
She's basically the villain of the fascist version of the Draenei. So, yeah, they took this cool character that lots of people loved, interesting female character that people asked to be brought forward into the story, and they gave us more of her story, and they basically made her a villain. Now, this is all still, I think this is all actually not even in the beta yet. This is all from data mine voice lines and things, so there's maybe some potential for wiggle room, but it
also,
looks real bad.
I mean, but also, when have we ever given WoW the narrative benefit of the doubt and had that pan out?
Right.
Yeah.
And WoW has this bad habit of any strong female character, they eventually turn into a villain.
Or break in some way.
Yeah.
It's pretty gross.
And this just feels extra gross to me. Like, she was so neat and interesting and just brand new and had a completely open story in front of her. And people begged for more story of her. And I see, like, in my mind's eye, some dev at Blizzard sitting there going, why are they mad? We gave them tons more of ERL. Like, what's wrong? This is an interesting story. Like,
the tone deafness is just epic.
And it also does not help things that this, Draenei character, basically you only get to see this chunklet of story through a Horde storyline, because it's part of unlocking the Magar orcs. And so, the whole thing feels both gross and tone deaf and incredibly wrong.
So there are just so many reasons like this that make me just not care about Battle for Azeroth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, so the worst part of Legion, hands down, was the faction nonsense that you did in Stormheim. I mean, the rest of Legion was really good.
Yeah, story-wise, it was pretty decent, and the gameplay-wise, leveling and everything was really fun, and up until basically Argus, I was pretty happy with it.
And it's like someone at Blizzard thought, oh, people liked Legion. Okay, we're going to give them more Stormheim. We're going to give them an entire expansion full of Stormheim. Because that's what you want. You really want to go back to Orcs versus Humans. That's what everyone wants. Everyone wants to go back to Warcraft 2. That's what a modern player wants.
But I suspect that it's like it's one of those, like, Blizzard's been around for a while, and so the people who are there calling the shots are the ones who have this, like, attachment to Warcraft 2.
But I mean, this is exactly the sort of thing that I was really hoping we would stop seeing when Metzen stepped down.
Yeah.
I really thought, I have lots of respect for him and his work, but also he has some specific ideas and favorite things, and I was ready for the game to move past them. And I was really hoping that with him no longer on board, that we would have this wide open space to do all kinds of interesting new things with. And instead, it's like they've doubled down. They've decided that, no, our whole brand is Horde versus Alliance. And I don't give any craps about that at all. I actively dislike the whole concept of that. I have faction pride. I prefer one faction over the other by a wide margin. And I don't mind seeing some pieces of that in the story, but I hate the contrived conflict, and I really hate the doubling down on keeping the factions separate from just a game mechanics standpoint. And so every time that they double down on the faction conflict in the story, especially when it's really beyond the point of making sense, not only does it annoy me from the story side, but it annoys me because it's a constant reminder that they still refuse to let me play with my damn friends.
And it becomes even more frustrating when Legion, other than one or two sore spots, was this great experience that was class fantasy based, and your faction really didn't matter so much. And that was like, this could be this wonderful future for World of Warcraft. Let's keep knocking down these walls until we all get to just hang out and play together. And now we've gone the opposite direction, and I don't know why. But like, all of this is frustrating for me, especially because when you're not caring about the current expansion, World of Warcraft is probably in the most enjoyable state that I've played it in a really long time. Like, me dinking around on low-level characters is really fun. Like,
yeah,
the leveling experience is super good right now.
I'm having this bit of cognitive dissonance because on the one hand, like, I'm actively playing WoW. It is fun. I'm, running around, not really caring much about Legion anymore because it's almost over, but going back and doing old things, leveling alts, doing the these allied race unlocks and all of these things, and it's fun. It's it's still one of my favorite MMOs, and it's still a pretty decent way to kill some time. But it's just weirdly frustrating to be enjoying the game, actively playing, and having this just revulsion to any new piece of news about the expansion. Like, when I'm actively this into an MMO and there's an expansion coming out, usually, like, I can get pretty hyped. Like, I'm excited, or I at least, like, I'm interested and want to keep learning some of the details about what's coming. And instead, it's like, no, I kind of feel like just putting my head in the sand and not thinking about it at all and just continuing to play and like pretending like there's not an expansion coming in a month or two.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. Like, I've been playing a Void Elf Hunter. So the simple fact that I'm playing a elf anything and enjoying it is, a whole other discussion, but and I enjoyed playing through Duskwood because it's been years since I've played through Duskwood, and it's a much better experience than it used to be. Like, Stitches is a triggered event instead of actively wrecking everyone's day. I'm playing through Stranglethorn. Stranglethorn's really fun.
I mean, I've been playing through Outland, and even though that's sort of a low point in terms of like leveling efficiency with the way that they've redone XP, it's still just fun. Like, I haven't actually had a reason to go back and play through the whole expansion in forever, because usually you just would, do the minimum amount you could in each zone until you unlocked the next one and then move on, because that was where you got the most XP. Now that everything scales, I can stay in, any particular zone. I could do all the necessary quests and like kill 1 million animals in the ground and like, actually have it be worth my time. I mean, as much as that ever was, I guess.
I always found the Nesting White quests relaxing for some reason. And especially with flying, they're actually pretty chill quests.
Yeah. But it's just, like, it's been fun.
It's just this weird, like, split in my brain that, like, on one hand, like, I just can't stand any of the nonsense that people are actively talking about in the game. Like, the whole prepping for an expansion buzz that happens. Like, I am not a member of that. Like, I just want nothing to do with that. But on the other hand, I'm enjoying the old experience of leveling in World of Warcraft. It was like the really fun thing back in the day that drew me to the game. So I don't know, like, it's just weird.
I guess, like, even, like, Warlords of Draenor, when that was announced, I was not super excited about it, but at least there were some, like, mechanical pieces and things, like, the garrisons and stuff that they were adding that I was interested in enough to still want to hear the news.
Well,
And the same thing with, like, Pandaria. Like, I really didn't like the concept of that expansion, and like, it actually turned out to be one of the better expansions, and B, it had enough other mechanical things that I was intrigued by that I still wanted that news. And in Battle for Azeroth, like, the main things that I care about are 100% cosmetic. Like, oh, the Kultirans get pretty freaking sweet armor. I guess that's cool. That's about it.
well, and like Warlords, even though it was an expansion about dances with orcs, it was like a chance to see what Outland looked like before it all got sundered. Like, I thought that was cool. Like, I thought it was cool to go back and see these zones in their unbroken state. Or, like, see what Zangarmarsh looked like before it was Zangarmarsh. And so that was enough to keep me entranced in the game. It's just, I don't know, like, I have access to Battle for Azeroth, and I just can't bring myself to play it. Because even though it's in a fairly complete state, the content just isn't that interesting to me. It's all super war-y. I don't know, for lack of a better term. It's like, it's all about, war. I like World of Warcraft better when we're banding together to take on unnameable menaces, like the old gods or the, dragonflights or things like that, rather than, taking on other people living in the world.
Blizzard would really prefer it if that weren't true.
And I don't know, like, maybe it's that they can't get past the fact that, like, World of Warcraft is a PvE game, and they would really love to make it a esports game like the rest of their titles.
I mean, that's a whole other can of worms, talking about the way that PvP stuff is going to work in the new expansion, and the ways that they're trying to bribe players into engaging in world PvP, giving, I think it's a 15% bonus to XP gains if you turn your flag on.
Yep. And supposedly better loot.
Yep.
Where's that how about no bear?
Yeah, because basically, like, every time they've brought it up, someone's mentioned, so basically what you're saying is I'll never have to see a PvP player ever again, right? Well, yeah, but you're going to have all these benefits for turning on PvP. No, so what you're saying is I'll never have to see another PvP player again.
There's this huge benefit. It's called I never have to see another PvP player again. It's a great benefit.
So, yeah, it's mentally, I'm in a really weird place with World of Warcraft. That's all I was wanting to say. That whole last 30 minutes or whatever that we've talked about, that's Grace has talked about, that's basically what we're saying, is we're in a really weird place with this game.
I mean, I'll be honest, I know what it sounds like to me, but...
Oh?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the two of you are reaching the end of your ability to enjoy WoW, but that's really sad. Like, that's really unfortunate, and the end of that is not fun. And so it's understandably, like, frustrating to be like, well, this is where we're at, even though we don't want to be. Because I think there's a lot of, like, inertia. I mean, we've talked about MMO inertia, but there's a lot of, like, this is the place where I play and I live and I love this game. And
there's a whole lot of sunk cost there.
Yeah, and there's a ton of sunk cost. And, like, what is the point at which you say, well, I'm not, this is more stressful for me to play or not as enjoyable to play as either something else or as I want it to be, especially now when there's not really another MMO to replace it. Because I
guess that's the thing, though, is, like, alting is as fun as it ever was.
Yeah,
Maining, however, isn't.
Disconnect. Like, running around doing old stuff is how I spend my time, and it's still completely satisfying. Like, if Battle for Azeroth came out tomorrow and it was a giant flaming pile of garbage, I'd probably still be subscribed to WoW, at least on and off, just to piddle around and run old raids and collect transmog, and I'd probably still level to the level cap and get a little bit of gear so that I could go back and farm even higher raids and get old transmog. It's just that I would like to be excited about the new stuff, and I'm really just not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, so long as the game that I'm enjoying still functions, then there's still enjoyment to be had. But I think the bus left the train, or the bus left the station without me, and I'm still really happy being trapped in the middle of Cleveland.
I feel like this metaphor got away from one of us.
Yeah. And I remember that Ash isn't here to chime in about Cleveland. So, okay, to move forward a little bit, Tam, Thalen, you said you had additional thoughts about Battletech after playing it for another week.
What an interesting game this is. So there is a thing, and I don't know if this happens with other people, but there's a thing that happens with me in games where I figure out I sort of work my way towards a highly functional strategy, and then that strategy mostly gets me through the rest of the game. And I don't really, unless I'm faced with something that like I simply can't. My approach is usually like, hey, this is the style I play. I will get better. I will get better at this style until I can beat the thing, even if it's not technically the right style. I'll just be good enough at it that I can overwhelm whatever the thing is. Battletech has done a really good job of changing up the way I play, just constantly. And in a way that I really enjoy. You kind of work your way up from like medium and light mechs all the way up to like giant assault mechs. And like once you get the giant, like ridiculous huge things, you're like, these are awesome and unstoppable. And then you do a couple more missions and you're like, well, actually these things are giant and unstoppable, but I want some other functionality. So maybe you go back to having a light mech or a couple of medium mechs or whatever.
It's giant and unstoppable, but it's also slow and goes last in the initiative.
Yeah, it's like this thing is huge and super deadly, but there's downsides.
Like, that's great until the opponents have like 12 like striker vehicles that all just one after the other, fire absurd amounts of rockets into it.
Yeah, and I really like that. I really like that I'm constantly changing what I'm doing. It's just a really cool. It makes for a really cool experience, and I think that the game still needs like difficulty settings. Like I think that's a problem, but I hit a point where I've got like a solid group and I feel pretty good about what I'm able to do, and like just going and doing missions so that I have money. I'm not like money isn't as much of a problem for me anymore. And having hit that point is the game kind of opened up for me, and it feels really, really cool. I like collecting new I keep on finding like new parts, and it's like, oh, okay, this is a really cool new part. What can I do with it?
Is this a mech that would have a place in my team?
Yeah, like is this a mech that would have a place in my team? Is this a component that I need to find space for?
Yeah. And in most cases, the answer is yes. There is a way I could use this. There are a couple of things where the answer is no. If you do successfully build a Banshee, just sell it. Don't bother. They're terrible. This is intentional.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing that I really like about it is if mechs are good because by the time you can put one together, you've been fighting one. And so if you put a mech together and you're like, that mech was garbage, well, you just made a bunch of money.
Yep. It's even better with the Banshee because Yang actually will the write-up on the Banshee is, yeah, this is awful. But yeah, like the only way you would possibly like get a mech, basically the only way you're going to get a mech without having fought a bunch of them is if it's one that you get through the story. So like the Centurion that you get early on. Or if for some reason, you happen to find three pieces of salvage in stores and pick them up without ever fighting that mech, which would be really unlikely.
And maybe don't do that because those are crazy overpriced.
Yeah, like that's the way to get the last piece of salvage if you have to and want to finish the thing. And even then, you might want to just like take some missions and see if maybe you happen across that mech again.
Right. And I like that they make it clear how to get new stuff and what the progression looks like and feels like.
I mean, it's the Monster Hunter method of building things, and I've talked about that being really cool, and this seems even cooler if it works for mechs.
Yeah,
it works really well.
It's definitely the monster. It's definitely got the Monster Hunter feel, where
and/or Pokemon.
Yeah,
gotta catch them all.
Yeah, there's a bit of that too, and because the salvage you can get from missions is the salvage you can get from missions is the salvage that from the mechs that you were fighting. There's this feeling of you get through a really tough fight, and now you can get some of the stuff that was used against you.
Well, and also that alone, changes up how you approach things. Because if you see a mech with like a double or triple plus weapon, and you really want to get that double or triple plus weapon as salvage, well, now you need to take that mech down without destroying that weapon.
Yeah, it starts to be, and like it's developed my current playstyle, which is the sniper alpha strike, where I have highly accurate pilots who just surgically remove cockpits out of mechs.
It's great if you can manage it.
And it's been going great for me, because it's like I minimize the amount of time I hit enemies in a particular angle, so I'm only really ever fighting one or two at a time. I'm removing one from the battlefield every turn. And then I just hit a mission that's like, hey, you're going to need 2 full lances for this. Be ready. Which, incidentally, I appreciate them telling me up front, like, yep, you need to be able to field 2 full parties. Do whatever it takes between now and then to set that up. Like, we'll wait. It's fine. But also means that I have to, like, get these pilots that I haven't really put much effort into and, spend some time building them up, see if I can't find some new, better mechs. I have to decide if I want to imitate what I was doing before, like build a second lance that's doing the same thing as my first lance, or if I want to try to mix it up.
I mean, can you, in theory, run one lance that's, like, very heavy that can just basically be a soak while you're sniping with your other lance?
I can probably do that. I don't know how that mission works, but...
Like, it's a question of, like, are the lances going to deploy, way far from each other, or...
Yeah, I guess that's true.
But yeah, once the initial difficulty curve, once you've like made it over that initial difficulty curve, and it kind of settles in, and like you aren't constantly in a state where one bad mission can just mean financial ruin. I really enjoy the pacing of the game.
Also, when just once you learn all of your options and things like that, when the game tells you that sometimes withdrawing from a mission is the correct option, it's not kidding. Like, I took a mission that offered lots of salvage, not a lot of pay. Okay, fine. I figured there might be some mechs worth salvaging in it. Jack the salvage up all the way, so I was only going to get like 60,000 C-bills from this mission. Deploy, it's nothing but vehicles. And they just start launching salvo after salvo after salvo at me, from long range, with, one vehicle up as a spotter and the rest just way out in the back. I very quickly realized that, like, I'm not going to get enough salvage out of this thing for it to be worth it. And pop one vehicle, get the hell out. Yeah, I didn't get paid, but I also didn't lose any mechs.
Right? Yeah. You're like, no. Well, and sometimes I don't think they do a good enough job of giving you intel, but if you're in a mission, and sometimes I've got a mission where it was like, wow, hey, they gave us bad intel. There's a huge set of mechs coming your way. Like, be careful. That can be a hint to maybe leave. Like, hey, you got bad info, and this is going to go badly. Maybe consider just jetting. And granted, I didn't, and it was really rough. But I walked out of it with a great big assault mech that I didn't have before, which was huge and awesome. But it was also like, oh, wow, that was super risky.
I'm really hoping that if and when everything with Harmony Gold finally gets, dealt with, that they'll be able to put the remainder of the Unseen into the game. Because it feels really weird not to have Marauders available. I
am not deep enough into that whole setting to know.
The Marauder is basically the iconic battle mech. It was the mech on the cover of the original book.
That's not like the Mad Cat?
No, the Mad Cat's a different one.
I thought the Mad Cat was kind of the iconic one.
It's the iconic mech warrior.
Oh.
Yeah.
The Marauder is the iconic battle, and it's basically a Zentradi
Battleoid
Office
or
Battleoid, I think. Yeah. So it's one of the unseen, and it's
Got it.
But that one in particular, it just like not having it in the game at all is just weird, because just Marauders should be around in 3025.
Yeah, a lot of the Robotech like mini robots that crawled all over the SD F1 were also the mechs that were used for Battletech.
Oh yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, because there's a whole bunch of like, and some really iconic ones that they just can't use because like for a while they thought that they were going to be able to, that they'd figured something out, but
Harmony Gold are assholes.
Yes. But so, things like the Marauder, the Warhammer, the Longbow, they're just not in the game.
Yeah, I mean, Harmony Gold has clawed back the license from Palladium. So, like, the Robotech miniatures game that came out recently, it's dead in the water now.
But on the other hand, they lost their suit against the Japanese company that really owns the rights, and so their contract is like up in 2021.
Yeah.
Assuming, that company doesn't extend it, which Japanese corporations tend to hold grudges.
Whoops.
So we'll see. But yeah, like apparently there's actually like, if you dig into the code, like the Marauder is actually in there, like, or at least is partially implemented, but it's not actually active in the game. In theory, maybe somebody could turn it on with a mod, but that would probably be more complicated than what mods can do. I think because the mods are all like just editing JSON files apparently.
Yeah.
Mostly, yeah. I'm going to guess there's not a config setting that turns on the Marauder.
Probably not, but who knows?
But yeah, I do really hope that, similar to what we've seen with the Shadowrun games, that the Harebrained Schemes continues to like update and improve and maybe create some additional campaigns.
Harebrained Schemes is pretty good about supporting their games. I don't know that they generally spend a lot of time like building new games, like expanding the existing ones, but just in general, they do a pretty good job of at least doing their best to support their games, which is, I think, cool.
Yeah.
I like that.
But yeah, for me, this is a game that I've wanted for a very, very long time, and I'm happy that it is as accurate a representation of Battletech as it is, even with the occasional, getting headshot just out of nowhere.
I mean, a lot of like relatively limited frustration with it has to do with I want to, like, this game is great and I want to be enjoying it more than it's letting me, basically.
Yeah.
But it's a cool game. It's fun.
You could just do what my friend did and, edit down those headshot percentages in the JSON.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can do that.
True.
Yeah, because just from what I've looked at, it seems like nearly everything that has like a value associated with it, you can modify.
Yeah.
Like if you want your available mech warriors, that show up in the hiring hall to be nothing but the Kickstarter backers, like you can edit the settings to do that.
It makes me wonder what level of the Kickstarter you had to be to get represented.
I don't remember, but yeah, it was basically you had an option where you, at that level, you could create your own mech warrior where you picked their call sign and contributed their biography, and they're all marked with a special symbol. When you see them in the hiring hall, they've got like a little blue thing that marks them out as being a Kickstarter backer. And
I'm pretty sure I didn't back them to that level.
Yeah, and they actually have a narrative, background, as opposed to the majority of the guys in the hiring hall that just have the individual, like, they're from this area, they're, are a criminal or whatever. Like there was one that I considered hiring, and the backstory was talking about how he was married and had 2 kids, and so they sold themselves as a package deal because, the wife was, it was experienced, ship crew, and the kids were cute. I was like, I could hire him. Then I feel really bad if he ended up getting killed. So instead, I hired the dude with the incredibly thick Brooklyn accent, and sure enough, he got killed in the next mission. Although, when we made it back to the ship, it turned out he had actually survived, and he would just be in medbay for like 4 months.
I mean, could be worse.
I've actually had that happen 3 times now. I was like really, really worried that I had lost Glitch. But no, she survived.
Yeah, I've definitely had the like, oh, whoops, that person did not make it.
So, we have somehow managed to do this again, where we went into a show thinking we had nothing to say, but have now gone over our time box.
It's the thing that happens.
Any closing thoughts?
I welcome any of our listeners to tweet at us why we should get excited about Battle for Azeroth.
Yeah, I would love to hear some reasons. But then again, like, I'm also open to any other things that our listeners want to tweet at us.
Always. But this time in particular, like, I really would love some reasons to get excited about this expansion. So if people have them, please tell me.
I would totally accept that, you know, in the second act, we wake up and it was all a dream, and we're continuing the class fantasy. Anyway, hopefully you enjoy the show, and we will see you next week for the Game of the Month show, I believe.
I think so, yeah.
Sounds right.
Anyway, good night!
Good night.
Good night.